The world might hate Saddam Hussein for a lot of things, but he was quite popular among the people in Iraq. Hussein was born in a time when the rest of the Middle East was controlled by European powers. At the time, the king was Faisal II, but he was really a puppet king, and while the entire place was controlled by European power, the French controlled their neighbor Syria. This led to large nationalist movements after the Second World War. Hussein was a part of an international party that called for a unified Arabic republic which ran westward from Iraq to Egypt. He was known as Ba'athist. During the 1950s, nationalism swept the country. It was a power struggle between Abdel Nasser, the president of Egypt, and an enemy of Israel. While there were assassination plots going on to kill Qasem, as he announced an alliance with the Iraqi communists. This was when Saddam was hired as a Ba'athist assassination team in October 1957. The Iraqi communists were opposed to the Ba'athist idea of pan-Arabist, and so Saddam was one of the men who pulled the trigger, and even though they thought Qasem was dead, he was only wounded. An inexperienced Saddam would have killed him, but he had a panic attack and his shots weren't as professional as they should be. While the Ba'athist assassination team was caught, Saddam fled to Syria and then to Egypt. Saddam actually got his education in Egypt and, with a stroke of luck, found the founders of the Ba'athist movement, a fellow Iraqi, Michel Aflaq. Saddam became a lawyer and a close acquaintance to Aflaq. He later joined the Ba'ath Party, which would soon replace the military rulers. In the 1970s, he became a pretty famous figure. Those days, he did a lot for the country with job opportunities and education for women, also limited the role of religion in government and the law. He believed that Iraq was one of the oldest, earliest civilizations in history and the birthplace of Arabs. This was the reason Syria and Arab had an on and off relationship. Ba'athist does not tolerate any kind of opposition, and which leads it to getting compared with Nazism. It wasn't like the Ba'athists were a democratic party, and so the only way for them to remain in power was through fear. And when Saddam became the power in Iraq by the late 1970s, he set up a cult and police force that many historians consider totalitarian. Mukhabarat, one of the most feared institutions, was a secret elite army that had many branches. From 1978 to 1991, the country ruled with a carrot and stick approach. He made a lot of money and the oil industry and bribed many people to become his accomplice. He also began a military buildup and a costly war with Iran. More than 500,000 lives ended with the war between Iraq and Iran. But the outcome was the same as before the war. It was all for nothing. The war did not make Saddam a hero, but people just began hating him. The United States of America was actually helping by sending millions of dollars in weapons to support Saddam in his struggle against Iran. Donald Rumsfeld, who served in the Bush administrations, visited Iraq and, on one famous occasion, even met with Saddam and shook his hand. Rumsfeld, who later went on to be the Secretary of Defense in 2003, spearheaded the effort to invade Iraq and topple Saddam. Saddam hated religious leaders, and one of them was Muhammad Sadiq al-Sadr, the father and the leader of today's most powerful political and religious groups in Iraq. They wanted to set up a government based on the teachings of Islam, which was something that the Ba'athist Party and Saddam were opposed to. When Saddam had control of the police and the military opponents, dissidents began to get killed, which was often done in public. In the beginning, these assassinations and killings were limited and they had a target. Men would be killed and taken down in the middle of the street by the police or Ba'ath spies, and the people close to the target were treated as collateral damage. Al-Sadr was killed in a similar incident with two of his sons in a drive-by shooting as they were coming out of a mosque. This incident divided Iraq between the two Muslim sects. This already complicated relationships between religious figures and the regime got tangled even more, and a lot of people began to leave the country and oppose the regime from overseas. Now, to teach them a lesson, Saddam ordered the kidnapping and punishment of family members of these opposition figures as a way to silence them. Punishments were brutal. Wives were sexually assaulted, sometimes in front of their family members. It could be their son or parents, and these would often get recorded and sent to the family members abroad to the opposition people. Anyone who Saddam thought was in favor of the opposition was punished, and thousands of them were taken and never seen again. Bodies of random people would be dropped off at home by the family members, and often the corpses would be pale and eyeless. By the early 90s, Saddam's two sons, Qusay and Uday, received immense power. Qusay was the quiet one, but he was more menacing one out of the two. He controlled the secret police and the other government organizations, including the famous paramilitary known as the Republic Guard. Uday, on the other hand, was thought to be mentally disturbed and an organ psychopath who was sadistic, and turns out that even Saddam at one point told his trusted advisor that he would one day kill his son. It's not that hard to imagine a person like that would have a very negative effect in the family. As teens, growing up in their childhood was not normal. Saddam forced his sons to execute his enemies while he watched. When they were killed in a gunfight, Saddam acted as they were martyrs in the history of the country. He subjected his enemies to sleep deprivation, executions, and slaughtered their family in front of their eyes. Starvation, beatings, and repeatedly dragged over roughly sharp concrete, which often caused infections and cuts on the victim's body. On top of that, added cigarette burns to the scars. But that was mild as compared to getting tied up on a pole upside down, as the secret police would hit at the bottom of their feet with a hose or a metal bar. He had very less to no record for human lives and suffering. Saddam's regime would be known as some of the most bloody and cruel regimes that ever existed. Brutal acts inflicted on them would sometimes go on for days on end, and survivors would recall their life being a living hell. After the first Gulf War in 1991 and until the US invasion of Iraq in 2003 were some of the worst years the country had ever seen. Public executions using swords were a common sight, while they forced local residents to watch, and if someone declined this order, they'd be dragged in for the execution as well. The use of poison gas is often recognized as a crime against humanity by almost every nation, but that was the favorite method of genocide for Saddam. The town of Halabja, which was a place that had Kurdish as the majority in the area of northern Iraq during the late 1980s, had a lot of rebellion during Saddam's regime. In response to this, Saddam waged a war of terror in the region, resulting in a lot of massacres and the most infamous bombing of Halabja. Iraqi bombers dropped a combination of nerve agents, chlorine gas, and mustard gas in a town of 60,000 people. 5,000 people died in a matter of days, while the others were left blinded, disfigured, and internally damaged by the gas. This was too much for the United States to see, and they began opposing Saddam. Shia Marsh Arabs, who were a minority cultural group that lived in southern Iraq for thousands of years, began opposing Saddam during the first Gulf War, and as a response, Saddam used gas and bullets, destroyed their rice crops, the local farmers were killed, and their cattle were stolen. The entire region was deprived of food, creating a famine-like situation. The area was drained of every drop of water, turning the area into a desert and causing many of the locals to flee to other countries. Some of them were arrested and killed or moved to other parts of the state as laborers. He killed thousands of people, 1/3 of the Marsh Arab population. Luckily, in 2003, Saddam was found guilty by an Iranian tribunal, and some people didn't like that it was televised, but everyone was happy that the worst was over. Thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode, we have a lot in store to check out. And don't forget to subscribe for more.